Welcome to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about playing every text adventure possible until all possibilities have been eliminated and whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. I am Jason Compton, joined on this episode by returning host Ben Collier. Welcome, Ben.
Hi there, Jason. How you doing? You all right?
I'm doing all right. We set a big task in front of us today with a festival of Sherlock Holmes commercial text adventures from the 1980s. You and I were not expert enough for the task, so we brought in from the wilds of Madison, Wisconsin, where I am also located, noted international Sherlockian expert Christian Newhouse. Christian, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Jason, for that introduction. Yeah, I'm pleasure to be here. I've been listening to your podcast. I enjoy text games. I enjoy Sherlock Holmes. So yeah, this is a great opportunity for me. Thank you.
And about as close as we can get shy of having William Gillette in the flesh on the program. Christian is the co-author of You've Ruined a Perfectly Good Mystery, an interactive stage experience that is having its international debut. I actually had it a little bit before this episode dropped. Christian, can you just kind of give us a little bit of your background with Sherlock Holmes generally and how you became an internationally published playwright in the Holmes milieu?
I think I got interested in the original stories, the Doyle stories, when I was probably around the same time I got interested in Infocom games. So this was about the time, so shortly after I was reading the stories, this was when the Jeremy Brett series came out. So that was another thing that got me interested in them. Then when I came to Madison, I was introduced to the world of science societies. These are offshoots of the Baker Street Irregulars. There is one in Madison, the Notorious Canary Trainers. So that's another way of for me to develop my interest in Sherlock Holmes. And then, yes, you've ruined a perfectly good mystery. That was something I co-wrote with Rick Stem, who lives in New Zealand now. This is written as an interactive play, sort of choose your own adventure style. We have a narrator who will periodically invite the audience to, by applause, choose what path the characters go down.
Okay. And, I know you from other plays that you've written as well. Have you done other published works in the Holmes or sort of, Holmes adjacent space?
I have. Yes, I have one other play. It was for a youth theater company near Madison. It was I retold the classic story, The Adventure of the Red-Headed League, as a 70s cop show.
Okay. So yeah, when we set up this episode, I'm like, you know what? I think this is a place to bring in Christian, and I'm glad I did. Before we get to the 3 games we have lined up, we wanted to catch up with a little bit of listener mail. First, listener Adam dropped us a note. He was following up on our conversation with Jonathan Partington and noted that he hadn't thought about just how prominent that 1978 to 85 BBC television Shakespeare project was, but that it made perfect sense that it was an Avon inspiration. So thanked us for covering that, and we thank Adam for listening. And Ben, we got a very thorough email from an authority in the TRS-80 color computer and adjacent space, right?
We did, yes. Curtis Boyle contacted us. He runs the Coco Games website. He wrote a fantastic email with loads of good stuff in it. I'll just praise some of it here. He said, great that you had Ian on to talk about Calixto Island and the Dragon 32. He says, I come from the TRS-80 color computer, the Coco side of things, and I also run the perpetually way behind Coco Games website. There we are. I have both the original 81 version of Calixto Island and its sister game called The Black Sanctum, which sounds sinister, as well as the 1983 rewrites with animated graphics on the site and on his site with a few screenshots. And he says about the graphics. He says you might notice that other than the artifacting, the graphics are identical to the later 1984 DOS versions, except for the color. And that's because the DOS one's using CGA with the 4-color palette, and the Coco one's used 4-color artifacting. And then he points out that you'll notice that commands and text on DOS can span the full 320 width on CGA, but the graphics are centered and they only use 256 pixels of width. And that's due to the fact that the Coco and the Spectrum have that as a limit, so it sounds like they're reusing it, and it's they're having to stick to the lowest common denominator there, which is the Spectrum or Coco. And he finally says the Black Sanctum was better with a better story. So maybe that's I think by our the definition of our mission, Jason, we will at some point in the future play the Black Sanctum.
The more we scratch at the mystery of Calixto Island, the more secrets it yields. Original versions, games that are even better than that. So it was the gift that keeps on giving that Ian suggested it for the show. And thank you, L. Curtis Boyle, for giving us the playable link to the Dragon-esque version, which we've already updated in the show notes.
Brilliant.
And again, really enjoy hearing from everybody. As we will hope to hear from you after our marathon of Sherlock Holmes adventures, the first of which is Sherlock, published by Melbourne House. This game was famously, or perhaps by the time we're done talking about it, infamously led by Philip Mitchell, who was co-developer of The Hobbit. This game is developed in the same English with an I adventure language, and it looks similar on the C64. It looks very similar to the Hobbit tape load version with wireframe, kind of solid fill graphics. We will talk about some of the limitations of the 64 version a little bit later. Its original platform was the Spectrum, and that turns out to be the one that you can actually finish the game on. And I'll point out at this moment, Christian, I don't believe that either of us would have played this game, at least not legitimately, because I can find no record of it being published anywhere in North America. Is that consistent with your experience?
It is, yeah. The Another Bow is the only one I knew about. So yeah, this was a new one to me.
Yeah, this one was first. This was in 1984. Ben, did you have any experience with this one? It not being a BBC title.
No, not a BBC. No, I don't have any memory of this coming out. Obviously familiar with The Hobbit because that was huge. But this one, no. And to be honest with you, as a general rule, your Spectrum gamers didn't tend to be as much adventure oriented as the other platforms. So no knowledge of this whatsoever. But it was really interesting to see it.
Yeah, so this was, I think I had heard of it, like the box art was similar, but I had never fired it up. And so what we get is a game that, again, in that Hobbit vein, has characters that manipulate the world around them and move around in ways that aren't necessarily predictable. You do get to influence them by making commands. Should also point out that each of these games has a little bit of a different approach to who is the protagonist and how is that story told. In this one, you are Sherlock Holmes. Watson is with you. You can issue him commands and ditch him in some cases being necessary. Lestrade shows up. There's another inspector. There are sort of NPCs and baddies that have some of their own timetables and schedules. Like I said, it's got some wireframe graphics. There are, on the 64 version at least, there are 3 rather repetitive, insane-making music tracks. I think I'll drop one of those in here. So once you're in the countryside a little bit, it gets to be a bit much. So this is an entirely memory-resident game, single-load, tape load. I kind of big picture view. I appreciated what they were trying to do in telling a very elaborate Holmesian mystery to pull apart, but man, was it difficult to make any headway on this game. Christian, you also being a first timer on this one, how did you find your first go at this one?
Very similar to me. There's a phrase I used in another podcast I listened to. I admired it more than enjoyed it. And that's kind of how I felt here. Because I have not played The Hobbit. I heard your episode about it, so I'm intrigued by it. But yeah, this is my first experience with this style of characters behaving in a ways that you as a player could behave. There are some very, very explicit Holmes references here. Like the first 2 crime scenes come directly from a Holmes story and a novel. And yeah, I was intrigued by just being able to follow characters around. Like when Lestrade thinks he's identified the culprit, you can follow him all the way back to London if you want to. That's really helpful. But I thought that was intriguing to me as something you could do in the game. Yeah. I did note that the advertised average completion time art on the package was several months, so maybe didn't get far.
Yeah, not what we're looking for these days. Ben, did you make the correct choice to play the Spectrum version?
I did. I with all of these things, you sort of tend to default to the pages online. I can't remember the name of the site. It's the one that lists all of them. You could probably tell me what that's called. I can't remember.
IFTB, Casa Solution Archive, one of those two.
One of those. And it links out. I think it links by default. It links out to the Spectrum version, which helpfully it links to a version on archive.org. And I thought, right, well, I'll start with that. And helpfully, the archive.org version doesn't actually allow you to enter inverted commas, making the game completely unplayable. I don't know if that's something that you came across as well. In the end, I was torn between pulling out my ZX Next, which would have been fun, or slightly more clunky and a bit of a nuisance to do, or running it on a different emulator. And in the end, I ran it on a different emulator. But no, I only noticed the C64 was there, and I thought, do you know what? I bet they'll all do the Spectrum one. Perhaps I should have a go at the C64 version. And something told me not to, and it looks like that thing was right.
Yeah. So this game has a fairly extensive manual, although I would say of the three titles, it has the least sort of immersive material. There's not really a novella or other sort of scene setting things, but there's a lot of instruction about, among other things, dealing in classical English currency, which is important because cab drivers demand payment, although trains don't. Like I noticed that all of these games that tried to set up some sort of economy, they sort of gave up on the premise partway through, but cabbies demand exact change. One fun element that I found while playing, because you can give commands to characters and see if they will obey them, Lestrade is described as carrying money, and I told him to give me his money, and he did. So then when he was traveling around on cabs, cab drivers were getting mad at him because he wasn't paying them, because I had taken, or specifically, I had convinced him to give me that money. Yeah, so like a whole lot devoted to sort of how to maneuver, how to wait. One thing that I did discover, they mentioned that the Spectrum version had been enhanced by you could break out of a long wait by hitting enter. At first I thought that wasn't true in the 64 version. Then I just figured out you had to hold enter. Yeah, a lot of timetable, and this is a real-time game.
Yeah,
should point out. So the clock is ticking, and it's sort of more perilous than the Hobbit, where if you didn't give input for a while, the other characters would take a turn and they might wander off or be turned to stone or whatever. But in this, the clock is ticking, and there are a lot of time-sensitive events. So although you can give it a pause command, like you've really got to be on your game, and any sort of input that doesn't count is going to eat into that total.
That was true for all of the games. It struck me that there's something about Sherlock Holmes that encourages people to write games which have really rigid time setups on them.
Yeah, timed events were important. This was the only one that actually had the real-time clock, though. Where it's ticking along even if you're just looking. And
that's it's very unusual for an adventure game. Is that the same as The Hobbit? You were saying that?
Yeah, they don't put the clock on the screen, so to speak. But yes, if you sit idle for 30 seconds or whatever, it'll then cycle happens. And Thorn will wander off and whatever. Yeah. So you have to expressly.
It's funny, a bit more like playing a MUD than playing an adventure game. Really, it's strange. Very interesting game. I mean, the thing that really struck me, and this it stuck out like a sore thumb. Being British, this was written by Australians.
Okay, interesting. Go on.
And it really shows. I only, to begin with, I think the first thing I noticed, I saw Sherlock describes how you'd gone into the centre of London with all of the tourist attractions. I thought, what a peculiar thing for a Londoner to say. And then later on, he visits the township of Leatherhead. Is it township? What on earth are you on about? The township of... And speaking as someone who's lived in London for years and years of my life, talking about Leatherhead as a township was fairly hilarious. And then there was some other language, when you fail to pay a taxi driver, the taxi driver says, "You bloody snob." It's odd, but it doesn't really sound right in English. But hang on, if I say "you bloody snob," all of a sudden it sounds right. And it's there's a lot of that in there, and it makes it as a British person just slightly. I don't know. I'm not going to say painful, but it sort of makes my eye twitch slightly as I'm playing the game.
Okay, well, that might come up to haunt us again a little bit later. Yeah, so I noticed more that, so maybe a little bit that didn't feel necessarily period. But I would say of the three, this is the least writerly, in that there's not really an attempt to write elaborate prose, whether it's in the Doyle style or not. I found my favorite screenshot of this game, which, when you run into Chief Constable Straker out in the countryside, there's a full screen of Lestrade, Straker, Watson, and Holmes all saying hello to one another.
Oh.
So I got the real Monty Python vibe of hello.
This funny. It felt like I was playing an etiquette simulator. 'Cause you have to say hello to people, or they won't deal with you. It's very peculiar, and I mean, of course, in normal conversation, obviously, I wouldn't just walk in. I mean, sometimes I do, but I shouldn't just walk into a conversation and say, "Give me this." But in an adventure game, it's a very unusual device. Was it the same in The Hobbit?
Ooh, I don't think you had to give that level of polite greeting. No, but then the Shire has different rules of etiquette. You didn't have to greet cabbies, but yes, a lot of people wouldn't respond to you correctly if you didn't say hello.
That is an interesting point about being as literary, because this is the one game where adverbs turn out to be important.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I was just about to talk about there's a lot of attention paid.
Yeah. Don't skip over that in the introduction, because one might assume that Sherlock Holmes is always closely examining things, but no, you have to specify carefully examine or closely examine if you want the full details.
Yep, and
tedious.
And the format of that matters because I have a screenshot here. Yeah, examine corpse carefully. That just generates a result of what? But if you do carefully examine corpse, then you get the information you wanted. And the price being as you watch the timer tick by, it takes like a minute to examine something, but like 10 minutes to examine it carefully. So those are things that matter. But yes, there's a lot of going through, not uncommonly for mysteries, much like Deadline or other mystery games from the early 80s. This isn't meant to be a game that you sit down and solve in one sitting. You're meant to play it, map out who's doing what and where, what clues you have to uncover at what time. Much to that multiple months of playtime.
Now, Jason, you were talking about that corpse. Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to examine the corpse, and I said, as you might, I asked to examine the body. Of course, no, it doesn't know. It won't let you examine a body. You have to choose the word corpse. So very much a case of noun hunting there. Yeah.
They packed a lot of content into this game for again a 48K single load. I will give them that, but yes, it did come back to haunt in some places where either the phrasing has to be very, very specific, or there's not a lot of forgiveness on the noun front. Something else that the manual warns about is they say we've received reports of crashes with the Commodore 64 version, and it's regrettable, but we really we'll fix it if we can figure it out, but we haven't been able to replicate it ourselves. I don't know where I bailed out on it because I simply couldn't proceed any further. There was a well-crafted puzzle where you have to sneak into the baddie's house, then into his yard, and you have to dig through a burned pile and find a note. And it was closely examining that burn pile, I think, where it just crashed every time, and it crashed with a clear stack overflow, because the text on screen would change. And I went back a few times a little bit earlier, and I was able to get past a couple of crashes. They also warn you not to talk to Watson too much because they're trying to store information that he's quote unquote learning, that can cause overflows. They tipped that one off, but I just couldn't go any further, so I had to quote finish the game by just watching the rest of the playthrough on a Spectrum. I'd spent enough time fighting the parser and other elements of this game. I did not have it in me to power through again in a Spectrum emulator.
It really is. It's so ambitious.
Yeah.
If you think about what's going on there on a 48K Spectrum with an independent world, you've got this emergent behavior. You were describing the emergent behavior with Lestrade, where you'd taken his money, and so he was getting angry cabbies having go at him. And that's amazing. That's like something from Dwarf Fortress. It's incredible. So I think it's easy to cast aspersions, but I think this is a technical marvel.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in experimenting with it. It's time. Yeah, it's pretty ambitious, and I like a lot of what they were able to do.
Now, Christian, how was the how was its Sherlockian accuracy?
Yeah, well, like I said, the two crimes are pretty much lifted directly from a couple of stories. Lestrade was kind of how you'd expect Lestrade to be. Watson, a loyal companion, I guess. That's kind of his kind of the limit of his character here. Yeah, like Jason said, it wasn't quite trying to be literary, but
yeah.
but
But
yeah, as far
how?
as observing clues, making deductions, and figuring how to express those deductions, that's kind of a problem. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, like what exactly to say to Lestrade to say this? There's an inconsistency of this character's story.
yeah.
I'll state that.
Yeah, some of the things that I had to go to hints for, like the fact that the little ding that you can see in the bridge indicates that a gun had been thrown off of the bridge. I'm like, okay, knowing what the solution was, that made sense, but I never would have got there in a million years. And that was
Yeah, well, that's directly from the story. So if you know that story, if you know the problem of Thor Bridge, you would know to do that.
and that may be a consequence of me not having read the stories front to back in 30 plus years. As you say it, that sounds more familiar, but yeah. And that was actually an area where I had to go back to some snapshots because at first I simply couldn't find the gun, and I'm like, everybody seems to agree that this is where it is. So I went back, and then I was able to get it later. We talked about the time sequence. Some characters like Lestrade seems to have more or less working hours. Sherlock Holmes and Watson, they can tromp around forever. I also was intrigued by the gardener who wandered around at 4 a.m., which seemed like it could have been something that indicated suspicious behavior, but was not, in fact. Yeah, to the ambition level of it, what I would have liked to see traded off was some more, and we'll talk about this again in the next game, I think, but the fact that there are these characters that are kind of caught up in these apparent conspiracies with each other, but asking one about the other, there's a pretty narrow range of responses that you can get, and everything else is just, well, why would you ask me about them? I'm like, well, because you're sitting right here, and one of you two is possibly in on it. So I would have liked to see that a little bit more. I'm just I'm flipping through. Yes. Oh yes, I did like, and this is where the not a terribly literary approach. It just flat out says like, and what is your alibi? Okay, we're saving characters on that.
But I mean, it's a shorter version of tell me about your whereabouts at the time of the murder. But yeah, it doesn't really seem like a natural sort of thing to ask someone.
No.
A lot of the language used in it was peculiar as well. I mean, even from the get-go, some very unusual sort of grammatical constructions, which is odd. I'm not going to blame it entirely on them being Australian. But
please add Australians to the list with Amstrad PCW owners of.
That's it. I'm gonna go fall victim to an Australian Amstrad PCW owner at some point. But there was some funny language in there. It was odd. I don't know whether it was because I don't know. Did you spot that?
I do know what you're talking about. Some of the. Oh my God! You found out. I am really Mrs. Jones. Like, okay, well, that's, yeah. It's some of the construction. Like I said, I think the least literary of the three, but if not the most complex, then I would say maybe the most complicated through line of our three games. Does that resonate for either of you two?
What do you mean by through line, Jason?
As in, the one mystery leading to another, in terms of how you have to pick through the puzzle.
Yeah.
Another Bowers we'll talk about is it's a salad of mysteries all jammed onto that ship, and then Crown Jewel. Well, we'll hold off on that. Yeah. I did like the way that because all these games use some of the tropes to different extents, and this one signals right away that it's going to be about Sherlock Holmes, the master of disguise, as of course his closet has the old man costume and the Chinaman costume. But did you guys notice when you're in costume how the English interpreter changes it? So instead of saying you go into, it says an old man is in the room. You get inventory. An old man is holding.
An old man is carrying your money.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Here's an example of that language. From the first, when this first comes up, the sun streams in the two broad windows in your sitting room. There is a pipe rack to the right of the sofa. Bullet pockmarks are the feature of one wall, and charts and diagrams fill another. Fair enough. Just a few little kind of clunky little lines like that, but. Yeah.
And they did talk with some pride about how many man months or man years was involved in the creation. This is a game where I wish, like we have now for the Infocom source code, I'd love to see the source code for this game. I'd love to see kind of the notes of how is this all supposed to fit together? How do these timetables work? And pick through it that way. as a rewarding game to play. It was extremely frustrating because a lot of things just didn't work, and eventually the game crashed out. But I would like to know more about the craft behind it, and I do wonder if old Philip does still have those.
I think it would be absolutely fascinating. I think it'd be quite something to see as well. The fact that it has this that feature you were talking about of taking on the identity of the person that you were wearing the disguise of. I think there's a lot of abstraction in this. A lot of really interesting abstraction. I'd love to see that code.
Closing thoughts. Were you able to solve the game? However, with whatever amount of help, but like, were you able to satisfactorily reach the conclusion, or did the bugs get you guys?
Yeah, I wasn't really undone by bugs. I was just kind of reached the limit. Like I kind of figured, okay, I'm not going to be able to figure out on my own what to do here. So I read through the walkthrough and said, okay, I get the gist.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll return to it. But yeah, I did not finish. No.
I got most of the way through. I got to a few points where I was having to wait and strange things were going on and couldn't quite make it all. And at that point, I decided to take an end to it. But so I think I was a good 75% of the way through by that point.
Yeah. Other things I'll say in favor of the system, which again was clearly very elaborate for being this tape load system. One of the final puzzles has to be solved by racing against the clock, as the baddie is getting ahead of you. So, but you are trained by Lestrade how to do it, because earlier he has ordered somebody to furiously, which is an adverb they give you, back to Christian's reference, to furiously go to a destination, which then you have to turn around and use to do the kind of the final chase. So the fact that not only did they cue it up, in the manual, but a character has told you this is how you get to a place faster. That was a great. A really great feature. Would have liked to see a little bit more, I think, use of things like that, and a little bit less just sort of crashing and freezing and not giving me the thing that I was looking for.
I think it's one hell of an accomplishment. You can kind of see why there were all the weird crashes and things, because the ambition's there, isn't it?
Yeah. The wireframe graphics, I didn't feel that they added too terribly much. They were okay, but nothing really to write home about for me.
Yeah, it was a bit like playing something like, was it Tau Ceti? I don't know, one of these kind of early sort of 3D things. It was peculiar. I can see how it lended itself perhaps more to the Hobbit. When you've got those very bright colours, they don't really lend themselves towards Victorian England, do they?
Well, and so maybe from the fact that, as Christian said, a lot of the sort of scenarios were directly taken from the source material, in some ways I felt that this one sort of best captured the what does it mean to solve a Sherlock Holmes mystery. I don't know. I don't know that some games that don't get published in the U.S., I go like, well, that's really a shame. I think they could have found a market. I'm like, no, I actually think I would have been pretty agitated to have paid money to play this at the time. Always happy to explore things with my fellow retro adventurers, but this was not one that left me feeling super, super warm towards it.
Yeah. Well, Ben, you used the term simulator. Yeah, that's kind of it. It wasn't just a Sherlock game; it was a Sherlock simulator. Like I said, Jason, it was step by step.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'd got very frustrated very early on with the language. I'd have really struggled to make any good headway back in the day. It would have driven me up the wall. Well, but I would have thought it was my fault.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's like.
All right. Well, we will have our no-fault divorce from Sherlock and move on to game number 2. And we move on to our second game, Sherlock Holmes Another Bow, as published by Bantam Software. This one was available on Commodore 64, DOS, Apple II, and Macintosh. Now, to preview something that'll be coming on a later episode, we have already heard from author Peter Golden, who is going to come on the program and have a conversation with us. So I'm going to be intrigued to ask him some deeper questions about this, so we can tee those up in our minds. But this game was published in North America, and this game I did get in the Firebird re-release, and I don't think the Firebird re-release included some very important things, including the 3-chapter novella that Peter Golden wrote to go along with this game. So I remember this game as an experience of booting it up, having no idea what was going on, having no idea how to successfully interact with the parser. We'll talk about what navigation is and is not in this game. Learning a little bit about a lady, snorting cocaine and then the ship blowing up. So it was not until sitting down to do this episode that I'm like, wait, the novella was real? Because the game boots with, read chapters 1 through 3, and I wasn't sure if that was just metaphor. No, it's a real thing. He wrote a real 32-page novella. There's a real map of the ship, but there's all this other stuff going on. I'm like, all right, well, that was not a good game. It's a little bit different if you have the original Bantam Software release. Gentlemen, did you have any experience with Another Bow before 2025?
Yeah, I did. I just checked, and the Firebird release, I recognized that cover, and I did have it. So that must be why I wasn't able to get into the game. I was missing these essential elements because, like you said, because it's kind of a common thing in a Sherlock Holmes story for Watson to refer to the titles of stories that he didn't actually write. So I thought that's what this was. But
exactly.
No, there's actually and I really like that novella. So my compliments to the author. Yeah. So I did. I guess I missed out on that initial re-release. Yeah. Glad he came back to it.
I had no prior experience of this whatsoever, and I'm afraid I didn't have the novella, so I had the I don't know what I had the proper Firebird experience playing this game, which was interesting.
All right, so. Whereas Sherlock, the Melbourne House release, was a strictly memory resident tape load kind of game. This one, as far as I can tell, this is splitting the difference. I believe that all of the game code, all the text is memory resident, but at the top of the screen, there's this sort of widescreen rectangular strip that shows you the room that you're currently in aboard the steamer Destiny, where there's lots and lots of stuff afoot. There's some number of these room sort of room panoramas, and then different kind of profile photos, kind of chest up pictures of the various and sundry people that are on this ship that fill the screen. So there's almost always Sherlock Holmes and Watson present in any room, but then any number of these many other characters that yes are explained in the manual and the novella. It's actually done in the style of an old. I guess there were actual. Like cast of character programs on steamships, at least the manual tells us that this is authentic. So all of these real historical characters are worked into the game. Houdini, Henry Ford, Alexander Graham Bell, and on down the line.
Absurd. It felt like the entire sort of cultural zeitgeist of kind of late Victorian Edwardian life had been thrust together on this. It was, that classic, that was a comic, the I don't know very well, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, where they kind of bring together all of these kind of incredible characters. It felt a bit like that. You've got some. I mean, it's bonkers. It's completely bonkers. But Jason, sorry. The thing that does occur to me, you're quite right. All the disk accessing stuff was a little bit slowed everything down a bit, but it would have also seriously impeded this game being sold in the UK, because the number of people who had disk drives was incredibly low. And if this game, I half wonder if it had a release as a text only game, perhaps. Don't know, but it would have been impossible to do on cassette in this form. So,
I can't find any evidence of there being a tape only release. I double check. I do think that it had a UK release, but yes, I know that a lot of disc only adventures or just games in general would have been hard pressed to find a market in the mid '80s.
I mean, there were a few people out there, but the vast majority of people didn't have disk drives over here. So it would have been a really niche release if it was put out here.
And so we should talk about sort of where this falls into the Holmes chronology. Sherlock, the Melbourne House one, that was just sort of a regular day in the life of the cohabitating Sherlock Holmes and Watson at 221 Baker Street. 220B Baker Street, excuse me. This one is sort of implying that it takes place after his last bow by being another bow. Christian, would you care to sound off on how you feel our author, Peter Golden, did getting Holmes and Watson back into the swing of things after his last bow?
I like the novella. I like the larger story presented. It also include references to other Sherlock Holmes stories. I thought it was an interesting choice. This is presenting Sherlock Holmes as not at the height of his powers, like the Mr. Holmes movie. Jeffrey Hatcher wrote the screenplay for. And that cultivates something interesting about Sherlock Holmes as a protagonist in a game like this, because ordinarily you as the player don't need to have the same skills as the character. But in a mystery game, it's your deductive powers. So you can observe with the powers of Sherlock Holmes, but you can't, deduce with the powers of Sherlock Holmes. So I thought this was an interesting way to reflect that, is that, sort of the Sherlock past his prime Sherlock Holmes is closer to us mere mortals.
Okay. And this is set just after World War I, which is going to become relevant as Ben scoffed already. Yes, the elaborate cast of characters gets even more elaborate as a secret is revealed partway through the game.
And something else about that cast of characters. This is kind of an example of what Sherlockians call the game, which is where you present Sherlock Holmes as a real person in our world. So for that reason, you can have Arthur Conan Doyle be on the same ship as Sherlock Holmes.
I was going to say, Doyle really doubles down on that. Yes.
Doyle is the literary agent of Watson, not the creator of the whole stories. You can have William Gillette on the same ship, who is one of the famous portrayers of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Spares no expense. Pages 28 and 29 of the manual give you kind of these 8-bit pixelated views of everybody you can meet on the boat. It also tells you that breakfast is served 8 to 9 a.m., luncheon from noon to 2 p.m., dinner 6 to 8. There's a lot of sleeping and eating in this game, which the perspective of Melbourne House Sherlock was you are Sherlock, Watson is a character. This one sort of split the difference in that you are reading it as though it is a Sherlock Holmes story being written by John Watson, but the commands that you are giving are from the perspective of Sherlock Holmes. So it's a little, sort of playing both sides of that, but it is being written in what to me I would say is, of the three, by far the closest to trying to be a Doyle pastiche style, which, based on Peter Golden going on to write a number of historical novels, I think was clearly sort of his on-ramp to that, and we'll hopefully hear that directly from him in an upcoming episode. But yes, this one, it's presented as though you are watching these what turn out to be 6 different adventures playing out in, not in real time, although there's a lot of timing element to this. This game is not there's no real-time clock going by. In fact, you have to specifically ask for the time. In Melbourne House Sherlock, the ticking clock is maddeningly on the screen. You've got to actually say, what time is it to find that out. But as you do move around the boat, talk to people, sleep and sleep and have lunch, that clock will tick on by. Navigation, like I implied, I had such a difficult time getting into this game when I first had it because I didn't know that it's not a game that you east, west, south, north your way through. You just say, go to the dining room, go to this area.
Or follow
and if
so-and-so.
you have the map, then you can do that. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
No, it's just, or follow so-and-so, you could go somewhere, or you could, there was a lot of following, wasn't there?
Yeah, and that's actually part of the challenge of the game, is that because there are these dozens of characters and they're doing different furtive things, there is a little bit of prioritizing. Well, do I need to finish eating lunch, or do I follow this one, or do I follow that one? And if you don't follow the right people at the right time, kind of like in Melbourne House Sherlock, where certain things became difficult to find, sometimes characters would just disappear from the grid. If you follow us on Facebook or Blue Sky, you'll have seen that I posted a shot asking where Colonel Lawrence had gone to, and the game told me that he was in Null. So this is obviously as a convenience and a realistic convenience, just saying like, well, we should be able to find out where people are on the ship, but it exposes that there is a null area that characters that you weren't supposed to find would be whisked off to. And go ahead, Ben.
No, the number of times that I was distracted. There was a really strange, I could almost call it a race condition in this game, where it waited for certain triggers for certain things to happen, and if you went about it the wrong way, you could trigger 3 things at once. So that you would see one thing, someone would say, "Oh, I want you to go over here," and at the same time, so and so would leave, and it may have been exactly the same one that I fell foul of, Jason. if you didn't follow them straight away, then when you tried to follow them, it says you have no idea where they went, and then you're stuffed. And I got into kind of living death scenarios that way. Now I don't know if they really were living death scenarios, but it felt like it because it felt like there was very little I could do to continue.
Yeah. So this adventure begins in Chapter 4 when the brutish General Philip Ryan is found hanged. And so that's sort of the first of what turned out to be 6 mysteries that Sherlock Holmes is meant to solve. And yeah, to the point that you were making, Ben, in my playthrough, which had some help, I was able to satisfy the victory conditions for 3 of those. One of the scenarios I got into where I couldn't save, I think it's Lawrence from being stabbed because I hadn't met the crewman who stabs him early enough because I hadn't followed the right person at the right time out of lunch. So instead of being able to save him with the same command that saves him, it's like, nope, he gets stabbed. And then there's a plot to disarm a bomb at the end of the game. But if you can't find Houdini to tell you how to deal with the bomb never shows up in the place that it's supposed to be. So you just wander around the boat for a while and you get blown up and everybody dies except for Watson. So that was the resolution I got. Well, not a real resolution, but the end of the game was, you solve these 3, but by the way, all of the leaders of the post World War I free world are dead, and Sherlock Holmes and everybody else that was on the boat. So that was where I ended up. How did you guys fare?
I got a bit stuck at the place where there's a lady who shows some interest in you.
Is there ever?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It was the best way of describing that would be, the Ron Burgundy, well, that escalated quickly meme. That's very much the way this. I was playing this very straight-laced text adventure game with on Commodore 64. The next minute, this woman's throwing herself at me. It was quite something, but there was something about I obviously didn't do things quite correctly. Because once she had done that, I think I did it at the wrong time or something, or as a consequence, nothing seemed to work after that. Something had gone out of whack. Again, I lost. I wasn't able to do a whole bunch of different things. I wasn't able to do the Lawrence of Arabia. I wasn't able to help him. Very odd the way it all sort of hung together, and I wasn't quite sure if I'd lost or what really. I didn't really know whether I was winning or losing. It was a strange situation.
Yeah, when my first playthrough, I solved nothing. I identified suspicious things that clues, but didn't figure out what to do with them exactly. Since as the manual says, it's a lot about being in the right place at the right time. So yeah, like I said, a little bit abrupt ending, and then the ship blows up. So, but that last day, if you don't solve any of this, it is kind of eerie because basically no one's around. So
yeah. And that I remember being the experience from trying to play it before was you talk to. You talked to Satchel Mouth about Mrs. Doubleman, I believe, and how she, where she came from and what she did, and that she likes a bit of nose candy. And then yes, everybody's in their stateroom and doesn't come out, and then it blows up. You're right, an eerie feeling to it. Yeah, the game is trying, I think, to give us the sense that we can, to some extent, not exactly take it at our own pace because there are timed events that are going to happen, but that it's not meant to be only a single path through, but like the situation where you can't save the one guy if you haven't met the crewman early enough. Like I said, I couldn't locate either Houdini or the elements that had the bomb in them late in the game. The puzzle didn't present itself, and there was no way to sort of reactivate it. So definitely some odd structure in the in the way those puzzles were set up. But there were, for me, there were some nice bits of writing and some fun scenarios. Ben, I understand why you're scoffing at all of the celebrities, but for my money, the image of Pablo Picasso in bed with the sister of the girl who's thrown herself at you, going in there while her father's berating her, and Gertrude Stein is beating up Pablo Picasso, like that's good stuff. So I'm like, you know what? If we're going to do this, if we're going to have this conceit that all these characters are here, let's do it. And that I thought was a great way to do it.
Yeah, it was nuts. Um, it's. I think if I was more invested in it, if I'd bought this for 14.99 or whatever when it came out, I think I would have probably been much more invested in it. And I can see how the way that it's built means that it's got that replayability about it, because you've got that ability to have all these different endings. You're trying to get all 6 of them. I played it through partially twice, and yeah, I can see how that might actually mean that it's more of a. It's got a bit more staying power. If you did have that original edition, you had the book, you understood what was possible. Yeah, I could see it being a good going concern.
So, Christian, no greater success this time around than in the late '80s with the Firebird release.
Well, no, I went through it again. I did have to rely on a walkthrough just because a lot of it is, knowing where to be and when.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily intuitive, but once I figured out, yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, there are a lot of the interactions between characters, like teaming up with Gillette and Houdini. That's cool. So I was able to complete it, but with some help. There is an easy mode you can switch on and off. But even there, you still have to be at the right place to get the additional hints, because there already is some fair amount of prompting, like this character looks like someone to follow. But
yeah, I'd wanted to ask you about that, because you were talking about the player needing those powers of deduction. But even in what is alleged to be the difficult mode, there was a lot of, as you say, a lot of prompting where Watson or another character would mention that something seemed to be going on and maybe it should be followed. So in that easy mode, how much more explicit were those instructions?
They were, but you had to be at the place, because if you were kind of stuck not knowing what to do, then I don't know if they would have been helpful. But like an example would be you seeing Lawrence in the library. The easy mode would have the additional prompting of you feel like you want to talk to Lawrence. So I think that's the kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so for me, the difficulty was just like knowing what seemed suspicious and what was worth investigating, but not knowing what to do with that information.
Yeah. And like we said, you cannot northeast, southwest your way through this game. Yeah. You get chided if you do. You can't ask for inventory. You get chided that we are not stock boys. But what you have in your inventory does occasionally matter. And there's just no way to be reminded of that, unfortunately. We want to talk a little bit about the writer, now that, Ben, you've pointed out that I guess none of our 3 games are written by an actual Englishman. I know that I noted when I went to try to rouse Houdini from his bed and I typed knock, it said, "We knocked Houdini up." And I thought, well, I don't think that quite means what you think it means. But I don't know if that would have been period authentic or not. Did either of you find this clangy as again, the closest to trying to write it as though Arthur Conan Doyle wrote it? Did anything clang for you?
Nothing comes to my mind.
I mean, it certainly wasn't as clangy as the Melbourne House game. Nothing really. I have to say, I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that knock him up. If I had, I would have put it in my notes and be guffawing over it. It wasn't as obtrusive. So no, nothing really rankled. The main thing for me was the peculiarity of the timing and all that sort of stuff, and that was the bit that really put me on sort of didn't get my heckles up, but caused the friction for me. In terms of the graphics, it's an unusual conceit. The sort of, you had this business of they had a sort of background graphic for each location, and then we've spoken about Rockstar Ate My Hamster in the past. But they used the same idea. They put a background up, and then they had icons for all the various people that were in the room would appear on on that background on
the tour bus or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, it was the same here. Where it was like you're all on the deck or you're in the dining room or whatever, and all the pictures of these different characters would appear on the screen. What did you both make of that?
I mean, I thought it was an effective way of creating some visual interest. Like I said, I started to notice as I just explored the ship with the power of the map, which I wish I'd had 35 years ago, that I was like, oh, okay, this is the same backdrop. We probably could have crammed a little bit more onto this disc here. But I liked it as a way of, establishing, okay, has everybody wandered off? They're done with lunch. All right, fine. And you can ask who is here if you don't recognize all of the portraits. And some of them, like when Woodrow Wilson shows up, aren't in the manual. Because, yes, we do find out halfway through the game in something that is clued in the program, because the manual, the program aboard the ship, has little bios of all of these different people on board, except for in the first 3 staterooms, which allegedly have the Astors and the Langhorns, and it says like, oh, they're having a family reunion, they're not coming out of their staterooms. Well, it's actually Wilson, Lloyd George, and Clemenceau having a post World War I summit aboard the SS Destiny. So, again, tripling down on far too many historical characters, maybe, but it actually paid off something that was set up, in the documentation.
Yeah, I thought it was very effective. The graphics were, they added a little something that was that it really gave the game its own character, and it was nice like that. Liked it.
So something that I didn't spell out when we were playing the Melbourne House Sherlock, but something I liked about it was that there was not a whole lot of focus on Moriarty. Because as a Sherlock Holmes consumer, like, especially once I read the stories, I'm like, oh, you mean this guy shows up in like one thing? Like, okay, maybe that's where he should be kept. This one, it hints at the involvement of Moriarty early on, and this Jeffrey Adler character who is might be Sherlock Holmes' son, and we sort of get a glimpse of Moriarty on a Russian submarine, but it clearly hinting that maybe there's going to be another game, which there wasn't. It was saving Moriarty for later, which I thought was as much Moriarty as I wanted in my game. But were the forces of the Bolsheviks not the most compelling foes for you guys?
With the scope of the game, I thought they were fine. Yeah, I was kind of expecting more of a confrontation with Moriarty though, because of that very very clear hint that someone either looks like him or moves like him is on board. So I was kind of expecting a little more from it, but I was okay with that being I guess Wilson's off the ship, so you're not saving the world leaders, but still. But yeah, I thought that was sort of a
oh, that's right. They do say that they're going on the ships that they were supposed to be on. That's right. Yeah. But plenty of other people get blown up. Ben, apart from the just the grossness of all the historical references, were those your greatest enemy?
The greatest enemy? What do you mean? Sorry, I'm
saying, like, ultimately the foe ends up being the forces of Bolshevikism, and the captain who will blow up his own boat to take you all down. Was that a compelling enough enemy, or did you want something either more or less epic?
Yeah, that made sense to me. I can do without Moriarty, quite frankly. I think that with the way that Sherlock kind of gets used in modern culture, they always pull Moriarty out, don't they? It's a really easy thing to do, and I think the forces of international communism are a kind of a suitable substitute. Yeah, why not?
So my final assessment of this game is that as the one that is clearly trying to be the closest to another Doyle story or these these 6 cases, I think that an approach that just leaned into a little bit more of a multiple choice approach that it kind of was already taking. In most of rooms, your option is who do you want to follow, who do you want to talk to. There's a little bit of take X and use X on Y, but that only shows up in a few spots. And I think by leaning into that a little bit more, probably would have been easier for people like Christian and me who came by the game legitimately to just experience what was there. The very tricky timings and as Ben said, maybe even race conditions kind of got in the way, I thought, of what could have been the best told of the 3 stories. I do think that this game is worth, again, with the map and the manual, spending a little time with even before you start looking at hints, because there is some ability to explore on your own, get the story told as you follow people around. I do think ultimately, taking a look at that walkthrough will be helpful. Christian, by following it, were you able to actually, get the 6 out of 6, cases solved in that solution? Okay.
I did, yeah. So, I agree with that assessment. Yeah, this was kind of in some ways, kind of like what's called a cozy game now, where you can't just go to different places and talk to people. Episode 11 of this podcast, you had your interview with Ron Martinez, his company Invention Arts. If they want to take this on as a project, like a Steve Voyage with Sherlock Holmes and 20 other notable personalities from this era, and just have conversations, hang out with Lawrence or even Louis Armstrong. That'd be kind of interesting.
And Ben would have been better on the BBC, but other than that,
yeah, the disc access would have been quicker. No, I loved it. I did enjoy it. I mean, Kristen is absolutely right about the vibe. I love games that have their own very unique vibe, and this is a really good example of that. It really has got its own unique flavor. It's got that replayability that we talked about. I would probably appreciate reading the all of the materials that came with this. That would have probably changed my experience quite significantly. As it stood, it was a bit of a sort of almost surrealist kind of experience. But yeah, absolutely good stuff. I would, in fact, both this and the Melbourne House, I'd recommend to our viewers to have a go on. They're both worth a try.
yeah, and definitely take a look at the full manual, which goes through some storytelling gyrations to say that the manuscript of Another Bow came to us through channels as mysterious as any Holmes ever encountered, and explains like why Bantam would even go so far as to turn it into a piece of software rather than just a boring old book. So yeah, and definitely looking forward to talking to author Peter Golden about that on an upcoming episode as well. As we turn our eyes from the SS Destiny back to London for our final installment in this Sherlockian festival. And we move now to the final installment, and perhaps the answer to my oft-asked question, why weren't there more Shakespeare games in the 8-bit era? The answer is because everybody was busy making Sherlock Holmes games. It's Sherlock, Riddle of the Crown Jewels, published by Infocom, developed by Bob Bates and his Challenge Inc. company, which we're not an Infocom history podcast, but it is worth taking a look at the story of this kind of last year of pure text output Infocom, this being the very last game that Infocom released in the pure text format, although on some platforms it's got those sound effects. I did take a quick listen to an Amiga playthrough to get those, but we're getting into the heart of the 16-bit era now, so Infocom is not publishing for quite so many platforms as before, but this game was out for Commodore 64 and Apple II on the 8-bit side, and DOS, Mac, and Amiga on the 16-bit side. So this game, I have to admit, as an American, as an Infocom fan, this is one that I simply never got into. I wasn't interested in it when it first came out. I'm not quite sure why. I certainly was still interested in text adventures as this was released late '87, early '88, but it didn't lure me in. In the 90s, when I got the Lost Treasures of Infocom pack, and then you own everything, and you've got the documentation for everything, I think what actually put me off was the newspaper. Like I love a feely, I love some background material, but the newspaper that comes with it is so dense. Yeah. I think just looking at it and going like, all right, I know that a lot of this is going to be relevant, but I don't know what, and I think this is just too much and I don't want to deal with it. So it was not until playing it for this podcast that I got into this game. Ben, how about you? Had you seen it before 2025?
Hadn't seen it before. I was aware of it for a whole bunch of reasons. And the funny thing is, when I came to play this, and I immediately went to the feelies and all that, because obviously Infocom's famous for that, and I knew there were going to be things that mattered there. And I picked up the newspaper, and my first thought was, oh my God, this is really dense. There's an awful lot of stuff in here. I don't want to be bothered with it. So it was exactly the same reaction that you had when you were, all that time ago. Yeah, it just felt like a bit too much work. I'm sure, again, I think if the money had gone in and I was back in the day and I was invested in it, I would have probably really kind of hoovered it up and actually been really into it and all that sort of stuff. And but if you're talking about buying that on a compilation, you're not so invested, are you? If I'd spent the money to begin with, my 15 quid, 20 quid, 40 quid, whatever it was, it would have probably I would have gone through it in great detail and been really, really invested in the whole mystery, and it would have been fantastic. So, but yeah, same experience.
Christian?
Yeah, surprisingly, I didn't know about it either. I am since text adventures and Sherlock Holmes are kind of my interest. Yeah, I didn't we even subscribed to the Infocom newsletter status line and News York Times before that. But yeah, I didn't remember there being a Sherlock Holmes Infocom game. And yeah, my reaction to the newspaper is the same as both of yours, TLDR.
Interesting. And yeah, Infocom being famous for the feelies, Deadline came with candy. I mean, they were poison pills, allegedly, but it was actually candy. By the time we get to this point, there have been some cost cutting measures, so it is mostly just the large the London Thames. And a keychain, which I am pleased and surprised to report. I pulled out of the package that I bought up most of the Infocom games in the 90s. And when I saw that it was in the package, I'm like, oh no, is this just going to be a sticky, disintegrating petroleum product mess? But no, actually, it's still in perfectly fine condition. So happy to report. And it's just a little keychain of the game logo. Nothing fancy and nothing.
I saw that. You can if you go online, you can look at the materials, and someone's taken a photo of the keychain, so you can get an idea of what that's all about.
Yeah. And so this story is around a very specific time and place. There's I believe it's the Jubilee, and the crown jewels are missing. So it's up to Sherlock Holmes and Watson. This time, once again, we've got a different perspective on the storytelling. You are Watson, so Sherlock Holmes can be interacted with. He will eventually fade into the background, leaving it to Watson and his sort of ragtag bunch to save the day. But we are in control of and experiencing the story from Watson's perspective. But unlike Sherlock Melbourne House, we're not memory resident. We can go to disk. We've got a lot of room for text, and there are definitely places in this game that make use of that. But unlike Another Bow, Bob Bates is not sitting there saying, I'm writing an Arthur Conan Doyle story. He's saying, I'm writing a text adventure in 1987 for the kind of people who want to play that game. So there are things that are being written to a modern eye. I think there's, I forget the exact word, but there's something like, you are in a dreary late Victorian drawing room, which is not something you would say in the moment. It's something that you're saying as shorthand for the readers. So let's do that quick check-in. We've dealt with one Australian and one American already. Ben, how did this one hit you from that, who is this that's writing this standpoint?
Well, it's interesting. I've got some notes here. You talked about it being the Jubilee or something. The language was pretty strange. Mm-hmm. They talked about the Coronation Day festivities. I was really struggling. When I was reading this, it came across as though they were going to crown someone. The language implied they were going to crown someone. It didn't sound like it was a Jubilee. So yeah, I think there was a bit of that. Very, very, very readable. Very playable, very readable in general. And I think I don't know what you think about this, but this to me felt like the most traditional text adventure of the three.
Absolutely.
And it certainly had a get the treasure and bring it all together and do something with it trope that comes up in so many of these games. It had the most traditional format in that sense as well.
Yeah, because I would say that Melbourne House Sherlock was trying to do a game about investigation. And Another Bow was trying to do, like I say, might have been better served by multiple choice. Whereas this, right down to, there are so many objects in this game. So many objects that very quickly, I don't know if you guys had this experience. I played it as I've been doing with other games lately. I built it in Commodore 128 Osmo. So I had the 80 by 25 screen, but kind of an 8-bit experience. Mm-hmm. But very quickly, those 25 lines were filling up with all the different things I was carrying around and things inside other things. Yep. And so yeah, very traditional in that approach. What did you guys play this on?
I played it on Frotz. So
so contemporary interpreter. Ben, did you play a throwback version or?
No, I wish I did. It's one of those things you kind of I was like, oh yes, of course. When I knew we were going to do this, oh yes, I'll get an interpreter out for one of my older machines. In the end, I was in a hurry, and so I just ran it on a web-based Z machine interpreter.
Yeah, much like you were saying, one of my first notes here is it's the standard, American second-person text adventure experience. You're in this room, you pick it up, blah blah blah. The world is telling you that you're Watson, but it's just very straightforward. Once again, we've got a deal in some old-time English currency, but it's not quite as intense. Mostly you've got to pick up from the So the transcript game, that haggling is very important.
Oh yeah, I missed that hint. Yeah,
yeah. Now, those transcript games where there's a feature of Infocom packaging, so they would say like, well, this is the playthrough not of this game, but of a similar kind of game, and it would usually show you, a verb or a technique to solve a puzzle that was going to be relevant in the game that you were actually playing. So yeah, the blowing the whistle twice to get the right kind of cab and haggling, those were kind of set up in there. And yeah, just going back to the fact that this is the final all-text adventure. So this is really the end of an era where Infocom had been trying to sort of make up for struggles in the marketplace with quantity. We'll link out to some articles. Jimmy Maher's done a really good look at the kind of this last year where Infocom just threw a lot of stuff at the wall, this being the last one. And kind of notable that they're going to an established property rather than trying to build their own IP up again. We talked about how many articles are in that newspaper. They're fun to look through and apparently are by and large authentic. There's actually a note in the manual that thanks the Times of London for permission to run a lot of things from authentic newspapers of the time.
Yeah, good. I hope someone didn't spend a lot of time creating original text for that, because I was not going to read that.
Here's a authenticity question, and I will admit I could have done a little research on this. I didn't, hoping that one of you two would know or had looked it up. Is keeping a stethoscope in a hat a standard Victorian practice, or is this something that Watson does in stories?
I love that bit, because yes, when I first saw it, I thought, what is this Monkey Island random location stuff? But no, it actually comes from a story. I'd forgotten. There is a story where, Watson does keep the stethoscope in his hat. So yeah.
All right.
Amazing.
It seemed that it had to be connected to something. But yes, another thing that, unless I missed something in the instructions, was more an Easter egg for experienced readers to note, and otherwise people would have to kind of dig through their inventory. Because yes, being an established person, you're not dropped into the world naked. You have your doctor bag, you have your hat, your coat, your cab calling whistle. So like I said, there's inventory to start with, and a lot more to pick up as you explore the world. Where again we have the clock. It is not ticking in real time, but minutes and hours are coming off the clock as we travel through London. I did see, and Ben, maybe you want to sound off on this. I saw people saying that they overall liked the way that the world was laid out, that it felt pretty authentic. From a player's perspective, it didn't feel as oppressive as the game Amnesia, which legitimately re-implements the Manhattan street grid, but mostly just kills you because you drop dead of hunger every 6 blocks you travel through. Did you have a take on how this American implementation of London felt from a map standpoint?
Yes, it certainly didn't rankle me. There's this kind of funny thing where you sort of go, you're going northeast and all of a sudden you've moved kind of a vast distance across London or something. But for the most part, no, it was excellent. And the fact that you were using the cab to get around, I mean, it was fantastic. Loved it. It felt great to me. Talking about that stethoscope, I loved the fact that it was a dual use.
Oh, yeah.
I love a good dual use of an object in an adventure game, and obviously you use it the one time to check on someone for something, and then later on you're using it for quite a different purpose, aren't you? Yeah, I thought that was really, really clever. But no, in terms of the layout of London, I thought it was great. It's and you used lots of iconic locations and it used them well. I thought it was very atmospheric, and it was a sort of, I don't know about accurate. I can't, it wasn't around then, but it felt like a fairly true reflection of London.
Yeah, well, it was interesting that both the first game and the game we're talking about now, where they have this sort of convention where you like one location per street, which I guess is kind of how you have to do it. But it was kind of interesting that they both use that approch.
Yeah. So for every exterior in the city, there tended to be the one interior. Yeah. To the dual use stethoscope, easy for me to say. I don't think we've talked about this too much on the show, but usually avid text adventure fans have that thing that they like to do in every game. So some people like to boot them up and type all the dirty words they can think of and see what the responses are. And we talk in a recent episode of Valkyrie 17 about what the game does to you if you do that. It'll crash out and so forth. One of my favorite things to do when I first load up a game. I always like to hit verbose, because I always want to get room descriptions when I go through, and I want to see if the game will give me a free look for doing that, or if it's going to charge me a move every time I do a look. And I like to do diagnose. Which usually in a Zork type game or Planetfall or whatever is telling you, like, are you tired? Are you hungry? Are you injured? Are you sick? But in this game, because you are playing Dr. Watson, is a verb that, as Dr. Partington would say, is not only used intransitively. Because yes, when you run into the young woman in distress, you can diagnose her, and it says, the streets are far too noisy for you to figure out what's going on. So you have to get the stethoscope out, and then, use it later for safe cracking, which had, one of the notes, like, I was already deep enough in the game that I could tell this is not Bob Bates trying to write like Arthur Conan Doyle. But when you do the safe cracking, it literally just types out click kerchunk. And I said, I feel like Golden at least would have given us a more Doyle-esque expression of safe cracking. And this was, again, he's talking to the home computer text adventure playing audience. I get it, but having come just from playing Another Bow, I was like, maybe I would have liked a little bit more of a Doyle pastiche there.
I thought that, that one with the safe was really a really good example of the quality you get from these games that have got the Infocom branding on them. This one, although and maybe go into another time, that the layout of it and the actual structuring of the game was a bit formulaic. The puzzles, there were some lovely puzzles that were just the right. They weren't tough, but they were clever, and they were doable. And it brilliant example there where you either have whir or click or clunk, and it tells you how what you have to do next, to work that puzzle out. It was great. There were a few other examples of similar things, and certainly in terms of the puzzles, it was although the language was not necessarily as florid as the Another Bow, it definitely it was fun to play. It was fun to play.
Yeah, I think one of the places where the language was close to the stories is actually what sort of when Holmes was taking the place of the parser commentary. Like when you save the game, he says, wise move, these are dangerous times. And then if you ask for a hint, he's like, if you must.
That was brilliant. Loved
he scoffs. And that is old Infocom tradition. One of the best is when a concept that would be foreign to players now, but you could ask old Infocom games to do script, meaning that it would start printing everything to an actual printer. And in Planetfall, Floyd says something like, "Oh, good, let's say all the dirty words now," so they get printed out. So yeah, having that character following around, giving that commentary, that's actually sort of traditional. I do have a note here in all caps. I don't want to hear more about Moriarty, so that disappointed me. That was our big foozle. I guess 1 out of 3 isn't bad, so I'll take it on that front. But I don't know. Were you guys more forgiving and accepting of his greatest villain / if we believe Nicholas Meyer's 7% solution, just a kind old math professor that Sherlock Holmes's drug-addled hallucinations have turned into a monster?
Well, talking of drugs, of course, we had that wonderful opening scene where they used the edgiest bit of Sherlock Holmes. Of course they did, where you kind of come in and he's there with his syringe about to shoot up, and you sort of point at the newspaper and he's like, right now I have something to live for, and he throws his drugs in the fire. The beauty of the Moriarty thing was that they were able to use it to construct this conceit that Sherlock had said, well, I've got this Moriarty, so Moriarty will be able to guess what I will do. So you must do the investigating for me, because he won't be able to guess what you're going to do, because you're not me. So I thought that was really quite clever, and yeah. So I was happy enough with it.
Yeah, I felt that because I liked playing the game. I was okay with Moriarty being the enemy. You do get a chance to have small talk with Moriarty. So yeah, I was okay with that. Some things I'm trying to figure out, like what things he'll respond to, what things he won't respond to. Like he'll talk about himself, but then he won't tell you about his plan. So like, if you want to ask him about things from the stories, like the binomial theorem or the dynamics of an asteroid, he doesn't have an answer for those. But still, I like being able to have like a confrontation with Holmes, Moriarty, and Watson. So yeah. I agree that people do kind of hotshot him, Moriarty. You have to bring him in early, but in this case, I was okay with it.
This being only the second Infocom game we've covered on the Retro Adventures, and by coincidence, it's also one of the few that has the the sound effects built in. Lurking Horror had them as well. Nick and I didn't talk too much about that. Like I said, I went to an Amiga playthrough just to experience them a little bit. It's very 1987 fidelity. You have to remember that audio compression wasn't really a thing back then, so you're giving up quite a bit of disk space to have those at all. I did sort of like the clinking around in the armor when you have to put on the armor to defeat a puzzle. Every time you would go from room to room, you'd get the clunking around. That I thought was a nice choice. The rest of them were pretty unnecessary. So you guys didn't miss out on too much by. Okay.
Well, I did play the file that had the sound effects, and I like the brief ones like Big Ben chimes and the carriage sounds. Yeah, I kind of like those, but some of the like. The sound of the Diogenes Club, the snoring and that weird crowd sound in Covent Garden. Yeah, could have done without those. But the brief ones, that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
The Diogenes Club. I've got a little a marker on here. Did either of you try going to the Diogenes Club to see Mycroft before Holmes was in danger?
I did. Yeah.
What happens if you go before he's in danger?
I think he just kind of brushed off. He says,
Oh right, yeah, I thought so.
The butler, the butler's there, but I think he just
always like won't take the ring or something.
Said Moricroft's not available, and you can't really go past that.
As these games go, I thought there were a lot of clever puzzle designs. I think, Ben, you talked about that. There is a lot of adventure game logic at work. There's a boat that's missing an oar, and there's only one other oar in London that will do. It's the one that's half hidden in Captain Blythe's rowboat at the museum.
Very good.
Right. Once you acknowledge, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do adventure game logic. Yeah. I thought it was a fun way to use all of that inventory that you collected up. I thought that things like the high low tide, that was kind of a clever, inventive way to construct a puzzle that wasn't just a series of either examining things a bunch of times until you found them, or use X on Y until you get some interesting combination. Kind of using time and phenomenon together. To solve a problem.
I did not. I did not get that one. I relied on the hints a few times. They are built in, which is I didn't know they were doing. But there's also you can also look at a website, and that's what I did. But yeah, I do. I think Infocom has a really good hint system. That progression that's gives you just the right enough nudge. Yeah, and as far as adventure game logic, there was a part where I think the game sort of recognized where you were thinking adventure game logic, because there's a shaft of light in the Westminster Abbey, and if you put your magnifying glass in the light, Holmes will recognize it. You're trying to make fire, aren't you, Watson? That seems like an adventure game move, but I don't think it actually needed to do it. So, but they recognize that players might try that. So that's cool.
That's
nice touch.
Cute, isn't it? I'm a big supporter of the underdog, so I want to not like Infocom games as much as I end up doing, because they are, it's like supporting Manchester City, isn't it, or something? No, this was a slick experience. It felt premium, It was enjoyable to play. I mean, that parser, the Infocom parser, it's famously good. But being able to say, something like along the lines of, pick up match, strike it. You can use language in a way that just doesn't turn up in other games, really. It's really lovely. My only real bugbear was I don't know if anyone else came across this. There's one of those awful you have to do it twice for it to work puzzles with the clapper in Big Ben.
I think that's a random chance thing.
Oh, it is?
Which
okay.
yes is frustrating.
Yeah, and I did it once, and the way it comes back to you implies that you need something to stand on, or it says it's just out of your reach. So you think, oh right, well I better find something, that's to stand on, and then I'll be able to reach it. In actual fact, you just have to do it again, and you get it. But that's frustrating. That's a bit that was a bit silly, because I could have wasted an awfully long time on that. and it would have really peed me off when I discovered the solution.
Yeah, as I'd mentioned, we lose Holmes late in the adventure. He's kidnapped by Moriarty, so Watson is left to save the day on his own. So Wiggins kind of becomes your tag along, and then in what felt like a slick, natural-seeming way, he gets peeled off the story as you go into the roughest place in London. You're like, well, I'll be waiting out here for you. And then we get to that final bit where you have the showdown and use Watson approaches to solve the problem and get out and save the day. But of course, everybody's far too humble to take any real reward. And this being, again, that very classic text adventure experience. We didn't really talk about this, but in Melbourne House Sherlock, you either solve the puzzles or you don't. There are bad outcomes that you're told about if the wrong person is unjustly accused, and he can get killed in the shootout and so forth. But that game does not have a concept of a score at all. Another Bow does do the tally of here's how many of the adventures Sherlock Holmes was able to solve, and were you in easy mode? Were you getting hints from Watson for any of them? I really did want to see, and I could not find a way to do it in a reasonable amount of time. If there was a way to get to the end without and get through that final puzzle that keeps the ship from blowing up, and see what that message looks like if you do sort of safely reach harbor but haven't solved everything. But this game, just from the very beginning, nope, this is a 100-point adventure game, and we're going to update the screen when you get points, and you can hit score and ask for your rank, and it'll of course it takes pot shots at Lestrade and so forth. Which, by the way, I wanted to sidebar on that. Sort of like how I prefer my Sherlock Holmes without so much Moriarty in it, I prefer my Sherlock Holmes without all the kind of trumped up antagonism between Holmes and Lestrade, because often they get along very well and they kind of complement each other. But this was a game that really leaned into he definitely hates Sherlock Holmes and and the dumbest person in the world who has no points at all. He's the chief inspector. So it was leaning into those tropes. But
yeah. If you read the matchbook, they lay it on a little thick there.
Oh yeah, that very immersion breaking matchbook. I had forgotten about that note. Yes, call Lestrade for instruction in being a terrible detective. Yeah. To your point, Ben, Infocom, yes, in some ways they were the you could say they're the 800-pound gorilla, but really, like we've talked about on the show, companies like Sierra, from a market standpoint, had it right when they turned away from text adventures, very early on. We've already covered Dark Crystal. Infocom, chugged along in text-only adventures for years after that. But as we see, from a business standpoint, they were scuffling. So kind of everybody who was doing text adventures in the latter half of the 80s was kind of by definition an underdog of sorts. This being an early game in Bob Bates's career, he goes on to be one of the last few publishing in the kind of pure texted, or something closer to what we would call pure text adventure, well into the 90s. And by that point, you've got LucasArts Adventures and Sierra dominating the marketplace, but with Legend Games, Bob's still doing these. So maybe that'll open up a discussion for how deep we get into the commercial 90s, since we've had a good run with Bob Bates so far. Before we move on to kind of a wrap up of the 3 games, anything else that you guys wanted to share about the Infocom Sherlock experience specifically?
I think the only thing I'd say is that it and I said this at the top, and I think it's worth reiterating. It really does have that kind of, you have a selection of ciphertext to decrypt. You have a selection of gems to recover, and you do them, and it's that very, very it reminds me of it actually reminds me of GFS Sorceress in a way. The same thing, you try the yellow button, then the red button, then the and you do each one of those, and then you finish and you've done. And it's the same sort of thing here. You collect the various gems, you're able to do the thing, and then it was very, very structured, and actually that makes it quite fun to play.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it's a game that recognizes what it is and what people want from it. Yeah, I liked how it isn't linear. You can do things in a different order. I did have to backtrack a few times. So, but yeah, I thought the clues were well hidden, even when I did need some help. So, yeah, I was happy with it. I thought it was like you did say, it is more text adventure than mystery, but I thought it was a good melding and enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which by way of wrap up really leaves me torn because Ben, I think you complimented how slickly produced Sherlock Riddle of the Crown Jewels is, and certainly it's the one of the three that. If there are, there could be bugs, there could be blind alleys, but by and large, yes, there's ways to lose this game, but they're probably not going to take you by surprise. In other words, like, wait, that should have worked. What went wrong? Or this game shouldn't have crashed. But as far as delivering like a mystery and or an immersive, I enjoyed reading Sherlock Holmes, so I would like to play a Sherlock Holmes game. It's a kind of third of three on that list for me. So I'm torn a little bit of which one did I, capital L, like the most. That might be another bio simply because it's trying and for me succeeding fairly well at feeling like, okay, yes, this is a quote lost Conan Doyle manuscript. But where do you guys stand on these three games taken as a whole?
I think each one's got something to offer. I think this is very much a sort of, you go to your Melbourne House for a tech demo, a tech demo from
84.
I was going to say it's terrifying, isn't it? 40 years ago, a tech demo from 40 years ago, basically, that does some really interesting stuff and is actually quite fun at the same time. C64 Sherlock. I mean, it's all on other platforms. I played on C64. Just a bit mad and fun, and actually, like you say, literary. And then we have the kind of your classic text adventure there. So each one is it has its own stuff, and I love playing all three of them. And if you're listening to this, then I've made your life no easier. You have to go and play them all.
Yeah, I like that assessment. I think that's kind of how I feel about all three of them. Of the two, yeah, it's kind of difficult to choose between Another Bow and Sherlock Riddle of the Crown Jewels. Yeah, I think if I do have a preference, I think it would be the Infocom game because it is a chance to have a Watson adventure. That's kind of cool. But yeah, there are a lot of things I liked about Another Bow. So yeah, like you said, I think they're doing different things. They have different visions. So yeah, I think this, varying degrees. I think they succeed with all they want to do. But yeah, I like the puzzle aspect of Riddle of the Crown, but it's something that feels more like a Sherlockian story. Yeah, it is probably Another Bow. Yeah.
Well, for licensing information on You've Ruined a Perfectly Good Mystery, Christian, where can they contact you?
Sure. You can go to ruinedmystery.com. There's a contact form you can fill out.
All right. If you are one of our New Zealand listeners, and we were recently surprisingly high in the video game charts there, wow. So thank you thank you, New Zealand. Hope you did check out the play when it was in town in April. Sounds like there may be other international opportunities. Ben, thank you so much for making it possible for us to play 3 Sherlock Holmes adventures for a listening audience. Always great to have you in the chair for Retro Adventure. Christian, thank you for being a supporter of the show, now a participant in the show. This is Jason Compton signing off saying, be nice to your local inspector. He could be having a very rough day.
You've been listening to The Retro Adventurers, a podcast about classic text adventure games. This episode was edited by Nick Moffat and produced by Jason Compton. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, including Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Podcast Addict. Visit us at retroadventurers.com and follow us on Facebook and Blue Sky. The Retro Adventurers is based on a format originally devised by Ben Collier, Jason Compton, and Dave Hawkins.